Everyone, and welcome to today's Mind Your Career webinar program. My name is Hannah Zwick, and I work with the Alumni Career Development Team here at the University of Chicago in Hyde Park. I'm delighted to welcome you to Using Professional Communication to Achieve Your Career Goals. Today, we'll hear from Hallie Crawford. Hallie is a certified career coach and national career expert based in Atlanta, Georgia. Her team helps thousands of individuals achieve their professional dreams, and Hallie has also been featured as a career expert in prominent media outlets. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to turn the floor over to her.
Thank you, Hannah, and thank you everyone for being here today. We greatly appreciate it, especially on what is most likely your lunch hour. As Hannah said, I am Hallie Crawford, and I am a certified career coach based in Atlanta, Georgia. I have been coaching and training for just over 18 years now. I know some of you might be thinking, gosh, she sounds like she's 12. How is that possible? I'm actually 46. And I have undergraduate and graduate degrees from Vanderbilt University, as well as the University of Illinois. And I'm thrilled to be here with you all today to talk about how to leverage and use professional communication in order to achieve your career goals. One of the first things that I wanted to tell you is that I didn't always know how to do this. When I started my coaching practice a long time ago, I actually lived in Chicago at the time, and I was fantastic at coaching, but honestly had no idea how to grow my business, which was obviously my career goal. So one of the things I wanted you to know first is that I do understand firsthand how daunting and sometimes overwhelming it can feel to not understand how to communicate incredibly effectively, or as effectively as you possibly could, in order to move forward in your career. Fast forward 18 years, this is what we talk about with our clients all the time. And the tips and tools, the three things that we are going to give you today, are things that we use and leverage and advise our coaching clients to do as well in order to achieve their career goals. And honestly, it can be any career goal. So let's take a look at what our agenda is for today, first of all. So we are going to talk about three main things: how to speak up and do so effectively, and what the formula is, so to speak, for effective assertive communication. We're going to talk about how to effectively manage your relationships at work, whether it's your boss, but also coworkers, and even with employees, if that's the case for you. And then finally, we're going to talk about developing your brand and how to more effectively establish your brand within your organization, but also within your industry as well, because that's part of communicating, obviously, externally. Did want to let you all know, so that you don't feel like you have to be frantically writing everything down, please feel free to email us at admin@halliecrawford.com. We would be happy to share a copy of the presentation today with you so that you have the slides as well. So let's talk for just a second about, the importance of effective workplace communication. We all know that everything is influenced by communication, especially our professional lives. It can be a make or break for how well we're doing and working with our coworkers, but also for achieving our career goals. And if you take a look at this slide here, and then we'll get to our first poll for today. We have two for today. If you'll notice, this list of top 10 qualities or skills that employers tend to want when employers and recruiters are surveyed every several years about what they're looking for in employees, notice that, first of all, communication skills is the main thing on the list. Now, obviously, you need to have the software skills, et cetera, everything else to be qualified for the jobs that you're going for. But the majority of the time when employers and recruiters are surveyed, soft skills are the ones that they list as those things that they're looking for in employees. Because keep in mind, everyone, soft skills are the things that they can't teach as well. They can't teach you to have a stronger work ethic. They can give you, some additional classes, for example, on communication skills, but you get the drill. They can teach you how to learn a new software program, et cetera. But these soft skills are these intangible things that they can't teach you as easily. So let's do our first poll here, if we can, Hannah. And I'm curious how many people currently feel that they have effective communication skills. And what we're talking about here is professional communication primarily, obviously. And then Hannah, after you all participate in this, she's going to read the results to me as well, because it's always hard for me to find those technology-wise. And take your time with this. We'll leave it open for a moment here, just to get a sense of where we stand in terms of communication skills in general.
All right, it looks like we have just about everybody in. 55% of our attendees feel that they do have effective professional communication skills, and the other 45% have answered no.
Okay, good. Thank you for sharing that. That's perfect. Thanks, everyone, for participating. One of the reasons why we do this is to know that you're not alone. And for those of you who feel like you do have effective communication skills, please take note of the additional things that are new for you, especially the coaching skills that we're going to be talking about a little bit later. And for those of you that don't feel like you have effective communication skills, obviously you're in the right place too. But know that you're not alone. Not everyone feels like, even if they've been a leader for a long time and have extensive work experience, we all can still stand to improve our communication skills. So here's the deal. If you take a look at this quote from Forbes.com, our communication style and approach, it reveals a lot about us as professionals, as well as impacts and influences how successful and effective we are in our career. It gives us important clues and others important clues about our sense of worth, the power that we feel that we have and influence in terms of steering our career in the right way. And it gives clues about how we feel about and what our ability is to lead and manage effectively. Every single thing that we do, as I said earlier, is communication. We can't not communicate. Even with our nonverbals, we're communicating with what you wear, everything that you do, every action you take. But even in some cases, keep in mind that inaction can be considered communication as well. So let's talk about our first step of the 3 steps here. And this is effective and assertive communication, or effective assertive communication, I should say. So take out your pen and paper, if you will, for us. And we want you to consider at the top of this slide here, to consider what your style is typically when you communicate in the workplace. Do you tend to be a more passive communicator? That would be someone who, isn't as assertive, tends to hold back in meetings, maybe avoids conflict. Do you tend to be a little bit more passive aggressive? And it's okay to be honest with yourself here. We want you to be. Sometimes, honestly, I can be passive aggressive. Every once in a while, it happens. It's just part of our DNA, I think, sometimes too. And when we get frustrated and if we feel backed into a corner or less confident in what we're doing in terms of our job or our tasks, this can happen. So it can be normal. Or are you a more assertive communicator? And that's what we're going for here. The goal is obviously not to be this girl screaming on the slide here on the right-hand side. One of the things that we would suggest you do as you're considering this and what your typical kind of default style is to track your behavior and your communication style for the next 2 days. Just get a journal, notepad, whatever it is, leave it on your desk. And for the next 2 full days, every few hours, just write down if you have a sense of, okay, that communication was good and effective in that particular meeting. That one with my boss or supervisor wasn't so good, and here's why. Because if you take a look at the next part of the slide here at the bottom, part of what you want to be thinking about as you're tracking your behavior for 2 days is what prevents you or gets in the way for you just being flat out assertive and being effective in your communication. Is it that you're conflict avoidant? We all are to a certain extent, but are you more so on the extreme? Do you have some kind of fear about, gosh, I have imposter syndrome and I'm worried that people will find out that I really don't feel confident about what I'm doing, for example? Is it that you're uncertain about how to communicate effectively? Or do you find yourself using or falling into a certain communication pattern or style based on your interactions in certain situations, in certain meetings, or with certain people? it's really important as part of this to start noticing what the themes or patterns are that you have as well in terms of your communication, because awareness, everyone, is the first step. Once you become more aware of, gosh, every time I meet with Joe, for example, it makes me really nervous and my communication isn't as effective. Okay, you want to start to notice what those patterns might be, because that will enable you to start shifting and making changes in those situations or with that specific person. And then finally, what are the things that can cause you, in some cases, maybe for some of you on the call today, this happens to me, to be too assertive? If you're frustrated, if you're angry, or if this just tends to be your style, maybe you're more extroverted and maybe you don't mean to be too assertive, but you just come across as that way because you have a big personality. And in some cases, in some situations, or in meetings with certain people, maybe you need to kind of tone it down a little bit. So our first recommended action step is to track your communication style for the next 2 days to get a sense of if you are practicing assertive communication on this next slide here, and how well you're doing it, or if it's something else in certain situations that you're in, or with certain people. So the basic assertiveness format, assertive communication format, this would be the ideal and what we're going for, everyone, is listed here on this slide with these 4 steps. One of the first things that you want to do, especially in a conflict-ridden situation, or if there's disagreement or people are frustrated, you especially want to leverage this first one. The first one is to show understanding. And you want to make sure that you at least show some sort of empathy for the other person, where they're coming from and what their perspective is. This does not mean, by the way, that you agree with them. Empathy is different from agreeing with them, okay? So you want to at least take a moment to state the other person's position, to let them know you understand where they're coming from. And ask yourself before the meeting, even more so, or during the course of the conversation, what is their point of view or situation? To try to understand, walk in their shoes for a moment so that you can be more effective when you communicate with them in this conversation or during the meeting, whatever it is. The second thing is that you want to make sure you state the facts about what happened on their end and what happened on your end. And if it's a conflict situation, how that action made you feel, for example, in terms of cause and effect. You want to ask yourself, especially again, if it's a conflict-ridden situation, what are the things that cause me to feel emotional or frustrated? Or it could be just that you're confused and you need clarification about a certain task or something they assigned you. Use feeling words to describe what's going on for you and the effect if needed. The third assertive way to communicate is to come up with a resolution for the conflict, or your preference for how do you manage future conflicts or challenges that may come up. And what do you want as a resolution from this conversation with this other person? And then finally, when it's appropriate, and usually it is, we usually recommend you want to state and try to come up with, a compromise here. What are some options that you all can take in order to work more effectively together to resolve the conflict, overcome the challenge, whatever it is that's going on? What option do you want in case the resolution that the other person has come up with doesn't work? How can you kind of meet in the middle? So assertive communication states what you need, but also provides understanding for what the other person needs as well, and allows you both to come forward with a resolution and possible options to compromise in what you need to do next. One of the pieces, if you take a look on this next slide here, one of the other things that you want to think about and practice with in terms of assertive communication is to come up with ways that you can assert kind of basic boundaries in the workplace and in your professional day, okay? So, for example, if someone is overly assertive with you, and if another person, for example, is coming to your office all the time and interrupting you, the way to handle different kind of scenarios or situations in an assertive but positive way are using some of the examples or things like these examples on the slide here. If someone, for example, is bothering you a lot and seems to ask a lot of questions more than you're comfortable with, start to practice letting them know hey, I'm busy until 5 or 6 today. Can we meet or talk at that point? Okay. If another person, for example, is giving you advice that may be unwanted or that you didn't ask for and it's unsolicited, you can always say to them, instead of getting frustrated or angry or pushing back, thanks for the advice, I'll consider that as an option. Again, that doesn't mean you have to agree with them. And if there is a very tough situation, the third example here is good for that. You can let them know how you're feeling. I become or get defensive sometimes when you say, why did you just do that? If you're upset, I prefer if you just say you're angry, whatever it is. So assertive communication is about expressing your needs. It's also about talking about and managing your brand and developing that, things that we're going to talk about in the next few slides as well. But one of the ways to help you move forward and develop as a leader in your organization and move forward in your career in a professional way as well, or towards your professional goals, is to practice and be able to leverage assertive, effective communication. Whether there's conflict or not, making sure that you use this formula is going to help you communicate more effectively with anyone in your workplace. So let's take a look at this last slide here, talking about assertive communication, and then we'll go to our next tip. So the action steps we want you to consider first is to track and identify what your communication style tends to be the most frequently, and also in what scenarios and situations and what, with certain people, how it might change. Practice the assertive communication formula with a friend or family member. Practice these 4 steps. A great idea would be to print it out, put it on your desk or in your desk drawer, so that when you go to the next meeting with someone that maybe you're concerned about the meeting, you're a little bit nervous about it, for example, perhaps it's a new client or customer, whatever it is, read through that assertive communication formula so that you're ready to go. And the third piece is to identify 3 new statements that you can use from the previous slide to set boundaries with people effectively and ask them for what you need instead of, for example, being passive aggressive or conflict avoidant, okay? So those are some of our action steps we want you to consider to take, or to take in the next several days, as well as tracking your communication style. And really understanding what your default style is, that is the main first step. By the way, if anyone feels like, gosh, I'm not really sure what my style is and I need a little bit of help with a situation I'm dealing with at work, we are happy to offer you a free career strategy session. This is directly with me. I'd be happy to chat with you about anything that we're talking about today or any other career goals or issues that you need help with. Just email us at admin@halliecrawford.com. Happy to set that up with you at any time. The second thing we want to talk about today, in order to leverage and use professional communication to achieve your career goals more effectively, is to manage your work and professional relationships more effectively. And there are 7 tips here that we want to give you in order to manage those relationships effectively. Obviously, we don't want to be like the guy in Office Space. That's why that's on this slide. I love that one. All right, so let's look at the first one. So one of the ways that we advise our clients to manage their relationships at work more effectively is to design the alliance, so to speak, or design each work relationship that you have, whether it's your boss, coworkers, or employees. Come up with the agreements that you all need to have in order to work together effectively. Now, here's the deal with this one. If you take a look at this slide, ideally, this would be when you're new on the job or there's a new person that you're working with. But by the way, if that's not the case, it's totally fine to sit down and say to someone, hey, I'd like to talk about how we work together a little bit more effectively, okay? You can still do it even if you're in the middle of a project or you've been working with someone for a long time. There's always a chance to make improvements. So these things on the slide here are the things that you want to address with each person that you have to have a professional working relationship with. You want to identify your objectives and your milestones. How do we know what our goals are, and making sure that those are clearly stated and set out for each of you. And you want to, as part of that, make sure you understand what your milestones are. How are we going to know? What are our touch points that we're going to know we're being effective and we're moving towards and achieving our goal? The second thing that you want to make sure you talk about with coworkers, employees, etc., are the roles that you each play on a team, or if it's one-on-one, based on what your strengths are. Make sure that each of you, that you're leveraging your strengths in the most effective way, that you're not trying to do something or work on a task or project and the role that you're playing is not the right one that you should be doing because it doesn't play to your strengths. If there's someone else on your team that would be better at that task, find out and see if that person can step up for that particular element of the project. The third thing that you want to make sure that you do, and ensure that it's not wishy-washy here, this is incredibly helpful, this piece, is to establish guidelines for how you can communicate with each other more effectively. The tasks that you each need to be performing, make sure those are clear. And meetings, how often do you want to meet? How do you want to meet? What's the best way for them? Do they prefer email because it's easier for them, for example, to process information in writing, give it a day, and then get back to you? Are you the type of person that prefers to speak in person or over the phone? And how can you kind of meet in the middle? Perhaps it is that you meet in person or over the phone, and the other person follows up with, okay, here's the action items in writing. Whatever it is, establish those guidelines for communication. It will help you all work together more effectively. You also want to set boundaries and ground rules for how you can work together effectively. I can only handle a 1-hour meeting, no more than that, and I start to get distracted. For example, I come into work at this time, and I typically am finished, early on these days or whatever it is, so I can't respond to you after that time. Whatever it is that you need to establish as ground rules for each of you to be effective, to work together, that's one of the pieces that you want to make sure that you cover as well. Finally, the last two pieces are make an agreement and actually talk about this, how to handle conflicts that you may have, disagreements, and feedback. Instead of just plowing into the work all the time, we can do a better job of working together more effectively and communicating more effectively if we talk about how we handle these different things, talk about how we work together, not just doing the work together. And then finally, you want to talk about and discuss, okay, here are the challenges maybe that we've encountered in the past and we might encounter in the future. How can we handle these more effectively together? Do you have any ideas of how to do that? And then share with them what your ideas are. So designing the alliance is the first way that you can start to manage your relationships more effectively. The second thing we want to talk about in terms of managing these relationships more effectively, let me get everything up on the slide here for this one, is to practice active listening. There are 3 levels of listening in coaching, and the first 2 are listed on this slide. The third one will be on the next one. So first of all, one of the things that will help you achieve your professional goals and show and demonstrate that you have solid leadership abilities is to practice the second and third levels of listening. Level 1 here on the slide is basically internal listening. I'm hungry, this meeting is boring. It's listening to your own inner voice. We all have to do this because we have to, be self-aware, but the goal in our professional lives, and honestly in our personal lives too, but the goal is to practice better level 2 listening, and that is focus listening. It's focused on the other person, really listening to each word that they're saying, but by the way, also listening to their nonverbal communication and their nuances. What are the things that your coworkers are not telling you? And you kind of get a sense that something may be up, but a lot of times we'll just ignore our intuition and kind of move on. So that focus listening and really taking the time to be quiet, let them vent if they need to in some cases, get something off their chest, and then move to action. Or if it's simply just listening so that you really understand how they're approaching a specific task or project, because then you can work together with them more effectively. The third level of listening is on the next slide here, and this is what we call global listening, okay? And it is basically the energy between the two of you, how it's changing, shifts in attitude, the mood, or the tone of the conversation. Solid leaders are able to understand kind of what the current is or the mood in a room and call it out and do something about it, okay? Not just brush it under the rug and ignore it. So the level 3 is also an important one to develop so that you have a greater sense of global listening. What's the energy and, going on, or the mood or tone of my team right now, and what do I need to do about it in order to improve it or keep it in a good spot? The way that when we're sitting one-on-one with someone else, or if we're in a team meeting, and let me pull all of these up, is in order to do this, to be quiet and step back a little bit more and allow for and be more comfortable with silence. If we're the kind of person that keeps rambling on and is uncomfortable with silence, that can make other people uncomfortable, and we can miss important cues that are coming from other people on our team. Still and kind of, just sit still and slow your body down or still your body down so that you can get a greater sense of your intuition and what may be going on in the room with the global listening like we talked about. Slow down when you're talking in team meetings or when you're talking with someone else, especially if you're excited about something or you're frustrated. That's when we tend to talk faster and too fast. In a lot of cases, we need to just slow down our communication to a certain extent so that we're not stepping over things that are important that other people are saying or trying to get across to us. Slow down the other person in a one-on-one conversation. Slow them down if needed, if you need more clarification about something. And finally, try practicing, instead of giving advice, which is kind of our human nature, we all want to be helpful and give advice and give our opinion. Try asking questions more frequently, and we will talk about this one in a few more minutes actually on another slide. But practice asking more questions and being curious versus giving advice all the time, because that can help you enormously with your listening skills and better understanding where someone is coming from and what's going on with them. The third piece or step that we can take in order to manage our relationships more effectively in terms of communication is to frame out our conversations a little bit better instead of just launching right into them. Set the tone of a conversation before you start talking with someone and give some thought for a few minutes, even if it's not a formal meeting with them, maybe it's informal. Still think about, what do you want to accomplish from talking with this person? Check in with them for a minute to, get a sense of where they're coming from and how they're feeling that day, what their attitude is about the project that you're about to discuss, because that can inform a lot of what comes afterwards. Check in with what they want to accomplish from that meeting or conversation, and make sure that each time where it's relevant and important to do so, to establish those mutual goals and outcomes that you want to have from that meeting or conversation. Again, don't just launch into it. Make sure that you're framing the conversation, okay? And one of the things that I wanted to share here too at the very bottom that I just pulled up, especially if it's a touchy conversation that could generate conflict. If it's something that you need to talk with a difficult coworker or employee about some feedback that you've either been asked to give them or you feel like you really need to, let them know up front that you need to talk about something difficult or touchy, and ask permission to give them feedback. An example of how you could do this is to say, thank you for meeting today. I really appreciate it. I need to talk to you about something that may be a little bit tough to hear, or that may be kind of touchy, but I really need to discuss it with you. It's critically important to the success of our project. Is it okay if I share that with you right now? The asking permission is a huge step towards getting their buy-in and letting them know what's coming so they're not blindsided and therefore could become defensive. Asking permission also allows them to say, you know what, I'm not in a good headspace right now. Can we talk about this later? So the asking permission is huge, because you can always talk about it the next day if that's going to be better for them. And then finally, when you're framing out conversations, use the assertive communication formula that we shared with you a little bit earlier. The next piece number 4, or step number 4 to manage relationships effectively, is to get better at asking questions. And here's the deal with this one. We want you to become a little bit more curious, like practice this curiosity, like I said just a few minutes ago. Be more curious about what's going on with the other person. It diffuses difficult situations when you allow them to vent for a few minutes if they need to kind of get something off their chest, so that then they can get into, okay, what do we do about this? it also empowers the other person to take action and helps them take accountability for what's going on for them as well, and the outcomes that you all decide you need to do, or the action steps you need to implement in order to make things more effective and better. We already talked about asking permission before sharing something touchy or difficult with them. And one of the things that we want to share with you today is this concept of powerful questions. One of the things that is incredibly helpful to demonstrate your leadership ability as well as your ability to motivate and manage a team and move forward in your career is to be able to empower people using powerful questions. These questions are open-ended. They're kind of like childlike and curious, like we were saying before. They don't have any judgment in them. They allow someone else to vent if you feel like they might need to, and they help you or help the other person explain what's going on for them and help you both identify a solution. Powerful questions are not yes or no questions. They offer or open up conversation to have open dialogue about whatever is going on and the goals that you need to accomplish or achieve. So I'll show you some examples here. And as you practice and are working towards leveraging powerful questions, everyone, you want to kind of notice as you're asking the question, if it's headed towards a yes or no answer, that's when you want to back it up a little bit and have it be more open-ended. Two examples are on the slide here right now. How can we improve our work relationship? What's the best way to accomplish this goal, either with or without conflict? You can just leave the without conflict off if it's just like, what's the best way we need to accomplish this goal? How can we do this effectively? And notice that with many of our powerful questions, when you're asking them, it assumes a positive outcome. So what's the best way to accomplish this goal assumes that you can accomplish this goal together, and it's just about having to work through whatever you need to work through and being better about it, okay? So asking questions is number 4. Number 5 way to manage relationships more effectively is to make sure that you are good at accepting and demonstrating that you can do this, accepting feedback. The incorrect response on the slide here to accepting feedback is obviously to dismiss it completely, blame the other person, and criticize the other person. That's not what we want to do. The correct response that you want to demonstrate in terms of your communication skills is that you can accept feedback and implement changes as a result of that feedback. So accepting it, implementing changes, and demonstrating that you can improve based on feedback will help you achieve your professional goals, not just because you're getting better about learning from your mistakes and from feedback that other people give you, but demonstrate that you're a leader that is able to accept, constructive criticism, move past it, and improve as a result. Tip number 6 to manage relationships effectively is to get better at recognizing other people's strengths and draw them out so that you can leverage them for not just your purposes, but for the team's and organization's purposes as well. The way to recognize strengths, and this is about you, but also for other people as well, is this sign model. This is from the Gallup organization and one of their Strengths Finder books. You probably have heard about that before, but these are the sign of a strength. When you do it and do a certain task or perform a task that is leveraging a strength, you feel effective. You feel like you're being successful, and you're actually being successful. I is for instinct. Before you perform this task or work on this project that leverages your strengths, you actively look forward to it. You get excited to these types or for these types of tasks. Growth, while you're doing it or performing this type of task that leverages a strength, you feel inquisitive and focused, like you're kind of in the zone. And finally, after it's completed, you feel authentic and fulfilled and like you've done a good job. One of the things we encourage you to do is to understand and take more time to understand what other people's strengths are and their personality type as well, so that you can then communicate with them effectively, but also empower them to leverage their strengths more and demonstrate that you're a leader and a solid team player as well. So recognizing other strengths, not just your own. And then number 7 is in order to manage relationships more effectively, is to understand what the 4 needs of followers are. And the reason why I share this with you all today is followers, I think, is kind of a generic term. It's about anyone in an organization. Any employee within an organization at any level has these 4 needs professionally. They need to have a sense of trust in their organization, in their supervisor, in their team, that everyone is going to follow through and they do what they say they will do, okay? They also want to have a sense of stability, that I'm going to have my job tomorrow, that I have support from my boss, but also my coworkers. We all want to have as well a sense of compassion, some sense of like enjoyment in what we do, that other people understand us and have our backs. And then finally, we all want to have a sense of hope within our organization, that, you know, the vision is, and the organization is headed in the right way. We believe in the vision, we believe in our supervisor, et cetera, et cetera. So in order to manage our relationships more effectively, and as a result, communicate more effectively with others, and as well as lead our teams, we need to always understand what others' needs are as well as our own in order to lead those people more effectively. And if there is a problem or conflict or a disgruntled coworker, for example, you can look to this model to say what may be missing for them that is causing this problem, that is causing their unhappiness or discomfort or whatever it is. And if things are great and in a great spot, make sure that you're continuing to work on these 4 components or pieces, because the more you can do that, not just with yourself, but with others, you'll be able to move forward in your career and achieve your professional goals and move up. All right, so let's talk about our third and last step to leveraging communication in order to achieve your professional goals. We all know what our brand is, and we understand, at least from a basic perspective, what the components are. If you take a look at this slide here, the 3 basic main components of a professional brand is who you are, what you do, and what you're known for in the workplace. And we'll get to our second and last poll for today here in just a second, Hannah. If you want to get that started, that would be great. We are curious how many of you have a defined personal brand. And I just wanted to share on this slide with you, I love this quote from Jeff Bezos: personal brand is basically what people say about you when you leave the room. It's the adjectives they use to describe you if they're talking behind your back, and let's hope it's in a positive way. That would be our intent, right? So if you can participate in our poll, that would be great. How many of you feel like you have a clearly defined personal brand? And we'll just give you a minute to do that. I'm going to get some water. Thank you all for participating in this poll. That's perfect.
All right, it's been about a minute and we have most answers in. 29% of our attendees feel that they do have a defined personal brand, and just got more, 27% said yes and 73% said no.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Hannah. We appreciate it, everybody. Thanks for participating in that. You know, branding it's an organic thing. And please know, like, can we clearly say at the end of the day that we have this crystal clear professional brand? I feel like it's something that we're always constantly working towards and working towards improvement. So it's okay if you feel like, gosh, I don't have a clearly defined brand. That's obviously why we're here today, but also know that it is something that can change and morph over time. And it's something organic that you want to be constantly working on. When we go to the next slide, or before we do, I want you to keep in mind the who you are, what you do, and what you're known for in the workplace. And the key here is that you want to not just understand what your brand is currently, but you want to make sure it's the brand that you want to be promoting and that you want to have. So here's a quick example of a short and sweet kind of elevator speech that helps define this person's particular brand. And you'll notice that there's the who, the what, and the results that they achieve as well. Rescue troubled companies, documented track record for business development, operational planning and leadership. That's the what. And then the final third sentence is the results that they achieve. They find solutions. They're able to foster team cohesion. This person pursues excellence, so has a very high standard in terms of the tasks that they perform and projects, and obviously, or also work with a high degree of integrity. And these are trademarks of this person's brand, and that's what they're saying here. One of the books that we actually like, I know some of these For Dummies books seem kind of like, really, are they going to help us? Seriously? But we've actually found a lot of them are very, very good. Personal Branding for Dummies is a great book that we would recommend to help you get started on what your personal brand is in the workplace and help you adjust it and change it to what you want it to be. One of the ways that you can start to understand what it is right now is do a quick survey of friends and family, but also coworkers and maybe even former coworkers. When you think about me, what 3 adjectives come to mind? Use the example we gave on the previous slide, what people say about you when you leave the room. A simple way to start to find out what your brand is to ask people, what are 3 adjectives that come to your mind immediately when you think of me? And if you're getting more personal answers, ask them about, okay, in the workplace, what do you think of, to kind of fine tune it in that regard. On the next slide here, in terms of identifying and starting to develop and think about your brand, you want to obviously write a branding statement, as we showed on the previous slide. But one of the things, the action steps that you want to take as well to start to develop your brand further and communicate it is to start to write, share, or comment on articles on LinkedIn. And do this more frequently than you do now. This will help you establish your brand, not just at your organization, but also within your industry. Consider writing articles for an industry blog or an association newsletter, again, to get your name out there and establish your brand. Serve on the board of an industry-specific association. Consider presenting at a conference. Volunteer your time for projects outside of your department or that tend to be outside of your realm, so to speak, to get your name out there a little bit more. All of these things will help you achieve your professional goals, because the more you have a well-established brand within your organization, but also within your industry and outside of your organization, the faster you're going to get hired, the sooner you're going to be considered for that next promotion, for example. So the more you get your name out there in the right way in terms of branding, the sooner you'll be able to achieve, and more effectively you'll be able to achieve your professional goals. So the last tip and step is to work on developing your branding statement, and then also taking these action steps on this slide here as well. All right, so before we get to the Q&A portion of our webinar today, here are, just as a reminder, the 3 steps that we talked about: effective assertive communication, working more effectively with managing your relationships, and also developing and communicating your brand. All right, so if you all can start to get out your pen and paper, that would be great. We want you all to think right now about 2 action steps that you will take in the next week as a result of being here on the webinar today. It could be, I want to practice the assertive communication formula. Another one could be, I really need to print out the 4 needs of followers because I feel like our team is disjointed and we're not all on the same page, and I need to get a sense of what's going on and kind of what those missing pieces are. Remember, I'm happy to do the free coaching session with you. Don't hesitate to reach out at admin@halliecrawford.com. Happy to help you with your specific needs. And before we get to the Q&A, and actually, if you could all go ahead and start entering your questions in the chat box now, that would be fantastic. As you're starting to think about those, I always like to close with this quote: the greatest risk in life is not taking one. Not taking these risks to try something new in terms of your communication at work will just keep you where you are now. And so remember, without risk, there's no reward. So this is the quote that always keeps me going. When I don't feel like stepping out of my comfort zone and trying something new, this is the thing that always pushes me forward. So go ahead and enter in your questions, please. And by the way, if any of you have questions that come up in the next couple of weeks that you want to ask, please don't hesitate to email me. Happy to respond to those. Again, just admin@halliecrawford.com, the same email that we've shared earlier. And if we don't get to your question that you asked today because we run out of time, please don't hesitate to ask that way via email either. So Hannah, if you could share any questions that we have yet, that would be fantastic.
Yes, absolutely. And again, like Hallie said, gonna beat this horse. If you haven't written them in yet, we do have the next 9 minutes dedicated for Q&A, so get those in now. But the first question we do have is, how do you manage and build an alliance with a colleague who is difficult, and how do you get those sort of people to buy into the value of managing an alliance?
Yeah, great question. And I know a lot of what we talked about today, or at least several points had to do with conflict, because I just know that that's a topic that people tend to struggle with a lot. So thank you for asking this question. So when you have a difficult coworker, for example, and things aren't going well, one of the things that you want to do at the beginning of kind of designing or redesigning the alliance is do the check-in with them and ask them some powerful question about, hey, how are things going for you? What's up? What's going on? Are there areas that you feel more comfortable than others? Are there areas that you're just not feeling as comfortable? Just do kind of an open-ended check-in and give them that space to kind of talk about whatever may be going on for them, because a lot of times we make assumptions about what is going on for that person, or sometimes we'll think it's something to do with us. And the majority of the time it has nothing to do with us, and it's something we didn't even expect. So the first thing you want to do before you even approach the whole alliance topic and all of those agenda items is try to get to the bottom of what may be going on for them. Go back to the 4 needs of followers that we talked about earlier, and even before talking with them, try to figure out if there's something missing in that formula for them that you could ask them about or kind of touch on in an informal way. Then go back to, the discussion about the alliance, and again, do the open-ended questions with the assumption that things can work out. How can we improve what we're doing here? And if it gets and becomes really difficult and you've tried to, for example, have the alliance conversation and it's not going anywhere, if you feel like you need to bring in a boss or a supervisor or HR in order to help facilitate that, sometimes that actually can be a good way to go if things have gotten that difficult. So hopefully that helps give you some ideas to get started.
Fantastic. And we've also had the question, how do you use assertive communication if you are in an entry-level position and do not want to overstep the boundaries of your role?
Yes, great question. So this is something that you want to practice the active listening first, and you want to also ask questions. So before you dive in right away, making an assumption about, let's say, how things should be done, or before understanding what's going on, take a few minutes and spend some time finding out what they've done in the past that influences why they do things the way they do now. So take some time to listen and learn first, and then dive into the assertive communication a little bit more. One of the other things you can do as a new employee is say, look, I understand I may not know all of the facets quite yet, but could we consider one of these options? So speak up, speak your mind, say what the opinion is, but couching it a little bit in that way can help it come across in the right way as a new employee. So those are some ideas to kind of get you started.
Perfect. And the next one is sort of similar, different spin on it. How do you use assertive communication if you are a woman in a male-dominated industry?
Oh, great question. So use it exactly as we presented it, but notice when you are hiding out a little bit more, for example, when you're not speaking up, when you do have an opinion, or notice also if you're providing too many caveats, like I'm not sure or I don't really know beforehand, because a lot of times that's what happens with females, especially in a male-dominated environment, is they may feel like they need to couch things and be a little bit softer. So notice when you're doing that and take it out, but instead say, here's what I'm thinking. Is that in line with what you're considering? So Combine it with questions to generate feedback and keep it open-ended, but don't be hesitant to just speak your mind. It's just doing it in the right way. And by the way, remember, for everyone, tone is a huge part of this too. The volume of your voice and also the tone that you're using can make a huge difference. So be sure that you're not hiding out too much and go through the assertive communication, formula. Make sure that you are speaking your mind, but just do it in the right way.
Great. And I'm going to skip around because we just had one come in that kind of follows up that. How can a PhD trained female not be off-putting with her knowledge?
A PhD trained female not be off-putting. Okay, so one of the things that I would do is, again, start with, and you don't have to do this in every conversation and in every case, but start by asking questions. Be sure to invite feedback and be open to it and demonstrate that you are. So practice the active listening and also ask questions so that you're not always saying, okay, here's what I know, et cetera, et cetera. And when you invite that feedback first and then share your knowledge and advice, that it can come across in a completely different way than just bulldozing it, right in the first place. In some cases, you may need to allow the other person to speak up and share what their knowledge is first. Because, for example, if you need to empower the other person to figure something out, in some cases you may not share it at all and wait till, they've come to their own conclusion. So pick and choose depending on the person that you're speaking with and how it will come across to them. Pick and choose based on the situation as well. But also, at the same token, don't hesitate to share what your knowledge is. Again, you just don't have to pontificate about it and, say 10 things all in one fell swoop. You can spread it out a little bit over time as well and sprinkle that in with asking the right questions to invite feedback and be open to it.
Beautiful. And the next one gives us some good context. They say, I liked the Set the Alliance. I have a peer that I send a lot of emails and no reply. So I want to have the conversation of how we can work together, but stating the facts of I never hear back seems accusatory, and I'm afraid the peer would be defensive. How should this person approach the situation?
Great. So one of the things I would do is, could you respond, just ask, make a request instead. In some cases, saying how it makes you feel would be appropriate. In this particular case, I think it would be much more appropriate to say, could you respond to these emails, the ones that I ask you about this, and this? Or could you respond more frequently or in a more timely manner to my emails? Because I am trying to get this, and this done, and sometimes it holds me up. Saying something like that, completely reasonable and not accusatory at all.
Perfect. And we're trying to get them done at 12:55. Do you think we have time for one more?
Sure.
Okay, great. Let me see. How about we go with, how do you deal when your manager has given you previous feedback about being too assertive but not wanting to come off as passive?
If you're too assertive, the likelihood is that you're not going to go to the other extreme and become completely passive. So just know that when we're, making changes, usually we, move more towards the middle and typically stop. The likelihood is very low that you'll become completely passive. Use the assertiveness formula in order to practice the pieces that you may be missing currently. Are you not giving enough time for the person to speak first, for example? And maybe for a while you let the other person speak first, and then you share what your opinion is. So what I would do in this situation is I would print that out and try to get a sense of what one of those components that you're missing the most and implement that one. But please don't be too worried that you're going to become completely passive, because like I said, usually we don't fluctuate to that, opposite extreme that frequently. You'll probably move more towards the middle, which is exactly what we want.
Great. Well,
Good.
Thank you to everyone for participating, and a special thank you to Hallie for her wonderful tips on communicating professionally and asserting yourself in the workplace. Our next webinar is going to be October 16th about how to build PR for your business. And please keep an eye on our events page online at careers.uchicagoalumni.org for updates on upcoming events. And take care, have a great rest of your day, and please take the post-event survey that's going to pop up in just a minute.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.